Hey guys, Caesar here. No one sets out to have or lead an unhealthy church or ministry, but often we find ourselves stuck in a loop of numbers and metrics that we may have inherited or they've been imposed on us by the higher-ups. For a long time now, churches have often or only measured three things that I call the 3 B's. Butts, that's attendance on Sundays, building size, and budgets. I wonder how Jesus' ministry career would measure up to these 3 benchmarks. Okay, let's look at butts and seats. Sure, Jesus could draw a crowd, usually around healings and or massive meal times. Yet he primarily spent the bulk of his leadership energy and time with only a dozen people or less. In the modern church, Jesus would not get a great score here, and he would probably not get that promotion up the ladder. Sorry, Jesus. How about building size? Well, Jesus never owned a home or built a church building, and most often he taught his disciples in the rhythms of normal everyday life, over meals, on the road, someone else's house. Gonna have to give Jesus a 0 on this one. What about budgets? When Jesus sent his disciples out with no money or food or extra clothing, like we see in Luke 9, he was teaching them that his Father can and always provides for that which he's called us to. Even when there was a little extra cash around, Jesus let a trader hold the offering baskets. Who hired this Jesus guy? Listen, Jesus was immeasurably the most successful person in human history, in every way. Yet, if we were to measure his lifetime effectiveness using today's current standards that we often use within church life, he would probably find it hard to get hired on at most churches. So here's a question. What if we had new tools to measure health and success in the church or in a missional community? What if we watched over and prioritized the same things that Jesus did? Here are 10 benchmarks of a healthy missional church. Here's what you need to do. You need to measure growth in the number of mature disciples being made. Disciples make disciples. They don't just hang out or sit in rows together once a week. Second, measure growth in the number of relationships with not yet believers. Is the relational base among those who are not a part of our church growing? Or are we moving beyond a holy huddle and building true, meaningful relationships? Third, measure growth in gospel display in and through the culture. Is our physical proclamation of the gospel expanding through serving others, especially the least of these? Is the good news demonstrated as good news for today? Fourth, measure growth in gospel conversations that are taking place naturally. Is our verbal proclamation of the good news increasing? Are folks growing in their gospel fluency? Does the gospel come up naturally and often? Fifth, measure the growth in the number of indigenous leaders being developed. Are new leaders, teachers, and preachers coming to faith through your ministry? Are you often just hiring from the outside of the family? Sixth, multiplication of missional disciples and missional communities. Healthy things grow, and if we're making disciples who make disciples, the number of our missional communities will be quickly expanding. Seventh, measure growth in ministry ownership levels going up amongst the saints. Our people, are they increasingly, willingly taking on the responsibilities of every area of life and ministry as a community or as a congregation? Eighth, measure our 5-fold maturity, meaning are there maturing leaders being allowed to lead in all 5 of the key giftings that are outlined in Ephesians 4? Apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. This is key to maturity throughout the entire church. Ninth, measure is the priesthood of all believers engaged in every area of ministry and mission. Another thing we learn from Ephesians 4 is that leaders are to equip the saints for the ministry and acts of service. Leaders aren't to be doing all the ministry. Now, look across your church or your community. Who's doing most of the teaching, preaching, counseling, planning, etc.? Is it paid or non-paid people? Is it mostly men? What about the women? What about teens and kids? And 10th, measure growth in people sent to start new works and new church plants. It should be the most natural thing for a church or missional community to be sending their folks out to start new communities. Are we raising the kids to move out? Multiplication always beats addition. If the ways in which we're teaching, preaching, and making disciples is not being easily reproduced to the third or fourth generation and beyond, well, the next best time to rethink our methods and measurements is now. We always focus on what we measure. What are you measuring? Tell me some of your most valuable measurements of health and success. Let me know in the comments below. Or if you want to push back or ask me questions, leave them here too. Hey, would you subscribe to the YouTube channel before you go? And as always, thanks for watching.